In the following video, I'll be sharing insights and testimonies relating to conquering diabetes. Among other things, you'll hear about a nurse who taught her diabetic patients exactly what she had been taught, but when she got diabetes herself, out of desperation, she found another way. She repented of the bad advice she'd been teaching and following, and she now feels like a new person. Here is another individual who is a registered nurse, a lady. She says, I'm a registered nurse in critical care. I was taught diabetics need to follow the ADA diet, and I taught my patients the same. Now, she's talking about the old ADA diet. The ADA has finally admitted that low-carb can be a legitimate way to tackle diabetes, and they've got a president who is a low-carber. So the ADA is changing, so we don't want to be too critical. Let's give them time to change. But she's talking about the old school, which was, eat your 60 grams of carbs per meal, have your snacks, eat 6 meals a day, take your meds, and get worse and worse. Now, they don't say that last part, but that's essentially what they were telling people. Thank God the ADA is changing. And sadly, it's been a slow change, been almost a grudging change. When they first came out and admitted that low carb can be a way to tackle diabetes, you got the impression they didn't really want to say it. They just almost had to. They didn't really like to say it. But like I said, they've got a low carber in there now as CEO of the ADA, so things are looking up. Anyway, she says, I was taught diabetics need to do it this way, eat the high carb, low fat. She said, that's what I taught my patients. Well, if that's what you've been taught and nobody tells you any different, that's what you're going to believe, and you're going to teach others. But she says, then 10 years ago, I discovered I had type 2 diabetes, so she got it herself. And she had to fight the doctors to even test her. They didn't want to because she was skinny. And they finally would do it when she used some blood sugar tests to show them she was high. She wanted a glucose tolerance test and had the hardest time getting a doctor to do that for her. Finally, they did. She says, once I'd taken the test, my numbers were in the 300 to 400 range, and then the doctors listened. Well, yeah, they should. And about the diet, she says, it was a whole new experience. I'm a junk food addict, and I dislike real food. That is not a good place to be. She says, I followed the ADA formula. I got nowhere with it until I came across your site or my YouTube channel. It was very hard in the beginning, like going through withdrawal symptoms, mood changes, headaches. Now, most people don't go through all of that, but I suspect she was so much into junk food and sugary food, she had worse than usual withdrawal symptoms. She said there was even shaking. But after 5 days, I gradually didn't desire junk as much. I slowly worked out for myself a healthy eating program. My A1C now is 6. I'm down to 1 pill from 3. I feel like a new person. Fellow diabetics, she says, it can be done. She says, don't follow the ADA, low carbs and high fat protein at every meal. Follow low carbs, high protein, or high fat, and some protein at every meal. Well, again, the ADA is changing, so I'm not sure that's quite relevant when she says don't follow it. Follow the right side of it. I think they're trying to speak through two sides of their mouth these days, and you got still some of the old school stuff on their website, and then you've got the new school. But that's going to change. But I think it's significant, this I was taught, and that's what I taught. And sadly, that's the problem with a lot of medicine and a lot of medical personnel today. I was taught, and that's what I teach. They're not diabetics. They haven't experienced for themselves just how futile it is to try a low-fat, high-carb diet and try to beat diabetes that way. I mean, it just can't hardly happen unless you're young and you do at least give up a lot, all the sugar. You maybe can get away with it. All right, this person says, 3 years ago, I knew nothing about keto or diabetes, but my weight was slowly rising. I was tired all the time. I read about keto, gave it a try, and I failed because I was avoiding fat. My ex-wife told me fat was going to clog my arteries. Ironically, she's a doctor and a vegetarian, and she's overweight. But she's telling him fat's going to clog your arteries, so he says, I avoided fat. Well, if you avoid, you got to eat something. See, that's the thing. And if you're going to go low carb, you're going to have to either increase your protein or increase your fat, because you just got to eat something. And the same is true if you reverse it. If you say, well, I'm going to go low fat, then you're going to almost always eat high carb, because you got to eat something. You know, you can't eat dirt, you can't eat straw, you can't eat gravel, you can't eat sand, you got to eat food. And either it's going to have quite a few carbs to it, or quite a bit of fat to it, or quite a bit of protein, or some combination. Now, Americans typically eat high everything, high fat, high protein, high carb, which is about the worst possible diet, probably worse than just eating high carb. You eat high carb, high fat, high protein. So normally when you decide, I'm going to cut something, I'm going to cut the fat, you'll up the carbs. Or if you say, I'm going to cut the carbs, you'll typically up the fat. You might up the protein, but you've got to eat something. So anyway, he says, I tried eating keto again, eating as much fat as I wanted to. Well, the first time he was trying keto, but he was trying to do low carb and low fat. And what does that leave? So he says, I tried it again, eating as much fat as I wanted. I lost 25 pounds. Well, that's what happens on keto. You typically lose weight if you need to. My last A1C was 5.2. Beautiful. Beautiful. You wouldn't need anything more than that. My blood pressure is 123/78. Perfection. This is a guy that was a total mess and didn't know where to turn. Now he's got A1C of 5.2, blood pressure of 123/78. He says, I'm not sure what these were before. I was too embarrassed to go to a doctor, but I feel fantastic now. My current doctor is young, well-educated, but still doesn't recommend keto. He tells me to keep doing what I'm doing, however. It's hard to argue with my fitness and success. Well, that's... Hopefully your doctor's smart enough to know that if you've got the numbers, you know, you've got good blood pressure, you've got good blood sugar, your triglycerides are in a good range, and so forth, how in the world can you kick at that? He says, I shudder to think where I would be if I had not disregarded my ex-wife's advice and listened to Dr. Fung, Timothy Noakes, and so forth. I suspect I'd be on insulin. You might well be, my friend. Normally it pays to listen to your wife. I don't know that that necessarily applies to ex-wives. Probably not. But definitely if your ex-wife or your wife is telling you to eat low-fat, high-carb, and you've got blood sugar issues, not so good. Here's a person that commented about the Ezekiel bread video, and that's where I compared Ezekiel bread. Actually, Benedict and my wife and I were both on that one. And we ate regular bread, and we ate, actually it was white bread, and then we ate Ezekiel bread. We found our blood sugar raised just about as much with the Ezekiel as it did with the white bread. There really wasn't much benefit in terms of blood sugar spike. A lot of people would say, yeah, but it's more nutritious. Okay, maybe so. But we're interested in blood sugar spike on this channel. I mean, that's the name of the game as far as someone who's diabetic. So anyway, this person says, I appreciate your video. What your studies are missing is the nutritional factor, how both breads will affect your body in the long run. So should we stop looking for healthy alternatives and go back to white bread? Well, you're missing the point. The point is not that white bread is where we're going to turn because Ezekiel bread's just about as bad. The point is you probably should avoid both breads, Ezekiel bread and white bread, and go with non-grains. Grains are a nightmare for diabetics. They just aren't very good. Now, there are some low-carb foods, grains, low-carb breads, that is, low-carb tortillas, and so forth. So those can work. They basically ratchet up the fiber way high until you're eating mostly fiber. But strangely, they usually taste pretty good. So, it works. But in terms of normal bread, the normal stuff that's like 12 grams of carbs per slice, you eat a sandwich of 2 slices, you're up to 25, 28 grams of carbs. It's just not a good thing for a diabetic at all. So the point is that all bread, apart from bread that's specifically made to be low carb, all other breads are a problem. Doesn't matter whether you're talking biscuits or rolls or tortillas, any bread product at all, and pretty much any grain product is just going to be a problem. Now, one thing we have to keep in mind, bread is not that nutritious anyway. So, some people say, oh, well, the Ezekiel bread is more nutritious than white. Granted, but even the Ezekiel bread is not that nutritious. Bread is just not that nutritious. If you're looking for nutrition, eat a garden salad, or have a tiny little halo, the little small oranges. Those aren't too bad. They're about 8 grams of carbs per little orange. I call them a little orange. I don't know what they really are. Clementine, I think, is the word for them. Those aren't too bad, but bread's not nutritious. It's basically a filler. You have, your meat, you have your vegetables, and then you want to make sure and get full for the meal, so you have a big old slice of bread or a big old biscuit or a couple of biscuits. They fill you up and you feel good, but they don't really provide much. You're not going to get any vitamin C from bread or not too much nutrition. So you can get nutrition a lot of ways besides bread. That being said, yeah, I do have, low-carb tortillas from time to time and low-carb bread. So I don't want to be a hypocrite and try to tell you, or imply that, you should never eat any kind of bread. I do eat low-carb bread sometimes. And, I will admit that. But regular bread, I don't. And one thing I find that even with the low-carb bread, if I eat it at night, as my evening meal, my morning blood sugar tends to be higher than if I just eat meat and veggies. Even the low-carb bread tends to give me almost 8 to 10 points higher fasting glucose the next morning, as opposed to just meat and a salad, or meat and some green beans or whatever. So bread can be a real problem. But, I got the same argument, the same criticisms when I did the banana versus the candy bar. People saying, oh, don't you know the banana's more nutritious? Yeah, I know that. I'm not stupid. But the point was not start eating candy bars. The point was don't eat candy bars and don't eat much bananas either, because they're both a problem for diabetics. So, we just have to be careful. There are things we can't do that others can, but that's all right. Health is far more important than being able to eat as many bananas as you want. All right, well, that's about it for now. Hope you enjoyed it. If so, give it a thumbs up so YouTube will recognize this is a valuable video and they'll promote it to others. And consider subscribing so you can be notified when we post new videos if you subscribe and then click that bell icon. God bless. See you again soon.